Qtron Man, yeah. I think she did contradict herself, but first I want to say I'm not going to get on any calling you a fascist bandwagon for various reasons. So, saw that video too. But anyway, in terms of the contradiction, okay, it'd be very interesting to go look into the anthropological / philosophical history of Native Americans. But this does not rely on that. Ayn Rand says that there are objective human values that can be drawn directly from looking at nature. You don't have to look at a culture. You don't have to look at anything. You can draw these moral values from nature. That's what she says. When you ask me and put me on this mission to find out what the relative customs were in each tribe and see if they believed what Rand believed, well, it doesn't matter. Neither the colonists didn't believe in Rand's version of private property either, and they weren't going out trying to make that a reality. They believed in things like manifest destiny and that they had some sort of metaphysical right to violate other people's property rights. So none of these people necessarily had a good enough, this objective version of property rights, correct? But let's say that they did. Let's say they had a good or objective enough, as if that would make sense in objectivism, but a relatively correct version, a better, more functional version. This is an objective value, so it applies to people that don't know about it. To say it only applies to you depending on your culture is an inherently relativist statement. To make your rights relative to your culture and situation is relativist. She was not a relativist. She was an objectivist. Those people, she drew these morals, she says, from the human condition, from human nature. She drew those from the human condition and human nature. Okay, so that applies to all humans. And for her to invoke a relativism in order to make an exception to her own philosophy is a contradiction, because her philosophy does not allow for that kind of exception. And that is why it'll be a moot point to investigate the nature of property. Now, one of the worst in Native American societies, one of the worst things she said is that she endorses the Hollywood version, the Hollywood view of Native Americans. And it sounds like the Hollywood view of colonists as well. Because no, they weren't all just these hardworking individuals with libertarian ideals. No, they had a lot of very strong social duty ideals as well. And a lot of metaphysics and priests and things telling them, yeah, go ahead and go colonize. And so, what they didn't have a perfect version of property. And what are we going to find in Native American societies? Well, for one, there's hundreds of them. So we're going to find hundreds of different versions of property. So we can't characterize them all as one. Some of these were peaceful little tribes on the creeks in the foothills of California and the Sierra Mountains. Some of them were much more warlike. We're going to find different value systems in these different cultures. But let's say we find some things that are a bit strange to our Western idea, like, the land doesn't belong to you, you belong to the land, things like that. Well, the colonists didn't have a perfect view. They didn't have a perfect view. We have supposedly access to this objective view through Rand of property. You wouldn't look for them to have a complete definition exactly like Rand's. I mean, that's like asking them for the definition to be in English. I mean, couldn't it be in their language, and maybe their language has different meanings and intonations that, things could be lost in translation? So you'd look for the elements, like a belief that they had a proper right to access that resource, like their physical possession, like when they move, what do they pick up and take? Do they take their own teepee? Do they build their own huts? There'd be concepts like this that in an objective framework would be elements of objective property, and you could actually see whether they had that view. But again, it wouldn't matter if they had the view or not, if it's an objective right, which I don't believe is possible. But if it's an objective right, then they would have that right, because it's objectively drawn from their status as human beings, from the status of any human being, and they are human beings, and therefore they would have that right. There is no exception in objectivity. That's the whole problem with objectivity. You don't get to do a bunch of these exceptions and special cases. It's universally true, and therefore it's universally true. When she comes and contradicts that, she is contradicting her statements that human morality can be derived objectively.